Hey guys, welcome back to another tech show video. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at one of my personal favorite Windows mobile phones, the Samsung Omnia i910. This device came out in December of 2008 when smartphones were evolving faster than ever and competition was really starting to heat up. Samsung, as usual, was very invested in the smartphone game, and with the Samsung Omnia, they were really doing their best to give people a much more user-friendly Windows mobile device than what had been out prior to this device's launch. And they did that with some minor software tweaks they called TouchWiz, which actually made its way into some more modern Android devices from Samsung until 2017. On the Omnia, Samsung used TouchWiz to add some more touchscreen friendly elements to Windows Mobile. It's a little confusing though because they didn't really modify the Windows Mobile system in any way, they just slapped some things on top of it. For example, the TouchWiz app drawer or main menu is the TouchWiz alternative to the Windows Mobile start menu. It gives you much bigger, more easily tappable icons than what you'll find in the start menu. The start menu is not gone, so it feels kind of redundant. Although I guess there's probably no way to remove the start menu, but still. The TouchWiz menu is really nice though, and it's definitely a lot more touch friendly and visually appealing than the Windows Mobile start menu. You can easily launch it by either tapping the main menu on the Today screen or pressing the physical menu key on the right side of the phone. In typical Windows Mobile fashion, you can easily remap the key if you want to, although I find it kind of useful, so I just leave it as the default settings. The TouchWiz modifications don't stop there though. The Hold Today screen is customized with two different options to choose from, Samsung Today and Samsung Widget. Samsung Today is pretty cool and useful, but a little boring. It gives you a 4x3 grid of predefined app shortcuts that makes this phone look a lot less like a Windows mobile device. But while Samsung Today is the functional and sensible option, Samsung Widget is the fun one. By default, you get an empty screen, but tap this arrow in the lower left corner and you get a drawer full of widgets you can drag and drop onto your Today screen. As fun as it is, these widgets are kind of big and will quickly fill up your screen with no option to add more widgets like on Android. I mean, you could put widgets on top of each other, but you'll have to get creative to make that work well. As far as factory included apps go, Samsung added a few cool apps that add useful functionality to Windows Mobile. The Touch Player app is a basic media player that is supposed to replace Windows Media Player, and it actually accomplishes what it's designed to do, which is to be a more touchscreen friendly media player, as the name suggests. Sure, it's kind of ugly, but the buttons are definitely big enough to easily tap, and that's really the whole point of Samsung TouchWiz. It adds some more touchscreen friendly elements to Windows Mobile, which was a really good improvement over the stock Windows Mobile experience. For the people who aren't into using a touchscreen though, the Omnia provided an alternative navigation option right here between the call buttons. This little square is what they call the Optical Mouse, which is pretty much a tiny trackpad just like you'd find on a laptop. And yes, just like on a laptop, you get a full mouse pointer you can move around the screen to interact with the phone in the same way you would a computer. It's super fun and honestly unexpected, but unfortunately it's not really all that practical. Because of its small size, it doesn't quite have enough space to sense where you're actually trying to make the cursor go. So it either jumps too far or doesn't move at all, which is pretty frustrating as you might imagine. Another slightly annoying thing is that the cursor doesn't disappear when you're not using it. If it's in your way, you literally have to hide it in the corner. If you don't like or use the mouse at all though, you can put the Optical Mouse in 4-way navigation mode, which basically turns the Optical Mouse into traditional navigation buttons, except instead of buttons, obviously, you just swipe the Optical Mouse. This is similar to the navigation pad on BlackBerry devices, except you can only move the selection one at a time, and it's kind of slow, so honestly, it's not that great. So yeah, you could probably safely say this Optical Mouse is pretty much just a fun gimmick with no practical real-life uses. Another cool little feature here is the motion sensor, which is just Samsung's name for the gyroscope sensor. While it's standard to have gyroscope sensors in phones now, it wasn't nearly as common in 2008, and Samsung made pretty good use of it here with some pretty fancy animations when you rotate the phone, which can be changed if you want to. At first I thought the gyroscope sensor in this phone was a little wonky, but then I figured out that if you turn the sensitivity all the way to the lowest setting, it's actually really good. Another use for the gyroscope sensor is what they call the etiquette pause, which pretty much just lets you flip the phone over to silence the phone. This is actually a feature I use quite a lot on my modern Google Pixel, which I've never seen in an old phone before, so this is actually a pretty cool feature to me. But that's not the only thing this phone has in common with modern phones. Take a look around the body and you'll notice there's only one port, which is just one of Samsung's proprietary ports they use in a ton of their phones before and after the Omnia. This one port is what you'll need to use for charging, USB connection to a computer, and connecting headphones. Fortunately, Samsung did include a 3.5mm headphone dongle in the case if you wanted to hook up some headphones to the Omnia. It also works as an FM radio antenna, no headphones necessary. Since it is going through through the charging port though, what if you're running low on battery while you're also listening to music? Well, Samsung thought of that. You've just got to go double dongle style. They included this second dongle in the box that allows you to use headphones and charge the phone at the same time. How cool is that? If you have the proper adapter, you can also connect this phone to a TV to cast your screen, but unfortunately I don't have that, so I'll just have to assume it actually works. I do have headphones though, and I can say MP3 playback works great, as it should, either through Touch Player or Windows Mobile. It's really up to you whichever you decide to use. The speaker on the Omnia is pretty decent. It is just one little rear firing speaker though, which was very common at the time. For video playback, you could definitely store movies on the SD card and watch them on here no problem, and even output to a TV like I mentioned earlier. The Omnia wasn't limited to media playback though. Media creation with the 5 megapixel camera was very doable. Combined with the built-in video editing app, made this phone a media creation powerhouse. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too dramatic, but video quality was a slight step above some of the competition, and being able to do basic edits on the phone was definitely fun, if nothing else. Speaking of media creation, I've just got to talk about this camera because it's actually surprisingly good in my opinion. Most reviewers from the time seem to think the camera on this phone was one of its weak points, but honestly I think it's one of the best phone cameras on a Windows mobile phone at least. But the i910's camera is a pretty respectable 5 megapixel camera with autofocus and photo flash. The 2-step shutter button on the side of the phone also makes those who are used to using a point and shoot camera feel more at home. And you can launch the camera app by long pressing the shutter button. The camera app itself offers some interesting scene modes and some shooting modes, including the smile mode, which automatically takes a photo when it sees you smiling. Useful for those early flip the whole phone around style selfies. This whole phone I feel like is just really packed full of little useful and fun features that really make for a good user experience. It's still typically Windows Mobile slow, so it's definitely not going to blow you away with its performance, but hey, people were pretty used to slow electronics at the time, and the other features make it so that you rarely even think about the poor performance. Just those little touches that make it so convenient, like the feature where you can press and hold the volume down button to turn on the flashlight. This is just all around a great phone in my opinion. Of course, it has its flaws, but I just really like it, and honestly, just to look at it, you probably would think it's a pretty boring basic phone, but there's definitely a lot more going on under the hood. It's also a great collection device because it doesn't rely on dead services like app stores. Since it's a Windows mobile device, you can just run pretty much any old Windows CE software you like, a lot of which is still archived on websites like oldhandhelds.com. And if you install an HTTPS capable web browser like Opera Mini onto the phone, you can download some games and apps directly onto the phone without needing a computer, although many Windows mobile applications will require installation over hot-sync, so keep that in mind if you ever try this. Now I do want to talk about one of this phone's worst features, and that would be the input methods. At the time this phone came out, hardware keyboards were still a pretty big thing, and it's easy to see why. Early software keyboards were very slow and poorly laid out, and the tiny screens they had to fit on didn't help things either. The software keyboard on the Omnia is unfortunately just as bad, or possibly worse than any other software keyboards at the time. Of course, using your finger doesn't help the clumsiness of the keyboard. A stylus like the one that would normally be included but for some reason wasn't on the device would make input better for sure, but still not as good as hardware keyboards, and tapping out little keys with a stylus is just really awkward anyway. This was just the evolution pains phones had to go through as manufacturers tried to make them thinner and more attractive while also fitting better hardware and components into their phones. While I don't know exactly how popular the Omnia i910 was, it must have made pretty good sales because in late 2009, Samsung announced the Omnia 2, a completely redesigned phone that looks more like a typical Samsung smartphone. They continued launching different variations of the Omnia all the way until 2012 when they released the last one, the Omnia M, a budget Windows phone that wasn't anything impressive at all. The first Omnia though, it's a pretty capable little cell phone that definitely put up a good fight against the competition. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy this video, it would be awesome if you could subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.